Hello! Welcome to the live stream. Good to see people here. Fuzzbubble says, hello, Dollarinos. Yes, we are here. Aaron says, hello. I have a cat on my lap who I think is just out of the view of the stream, but I think I can get you a cat cam here, which is, I think, going to be probably the most exciting thing that is going on. So, hold on just a second. Yep, there we go. There's Miss Dora. She has decided that she would like to be part of this live stream and refuses to do anything else. So here we go. This is what's going on right now. So maybe she'll just do the live stream. As you might be able to tell from the title, I am very chaotic today because I kind of accidentally had too much caffeine today. Aaron, very sweetly, before Aaron left town, made some cold brew for me. The thing about cold brew is it's kind of hard to estimate because it's like super concentrated, how much you're having. And I thought that I was not making that much, but I think I may have had the equivalent of like 5 or 6 shots of espresso, possibly more. Anyway, I was just an anxious mess. I got myself into an anxious mess. So here's Miss Princess, who wants to be involved in this live stream. It is hot as Hades in this room because it has been over 90 degrees for 4 days, which is an all-time record of the most 90 degrees days in May ever in Portland, Oregon. And then the fact that they're all consecutive. So 90 degrees is like 35-ish, I believe, I want to say. Celsius. Let's double check that. I think it's 35-ish. Oh, 32. 32. But it's been 90 or over every day for the past 4 days. And we don't really have air conditioning in a lot of places in Portland. So we have like a little portable AC that does okay-ish. It can bring the temperature down about 10 degrees from what it is outside. So if it's 80 outside, it can get it to 70 in here. If it's 90 outside, it can get it to 80 in here. It only is in the other room. It is not in this room that I live stream in. And I was seriously considering not even live streaming because it is so hot. But I did some really aggressive rotating fan stuff to try to get the temperature down. And then Miss Dora doesn't seem to care and continues to want a lap here. I like how she's looking at the camera. I didn't bring in a tripod for this, so if we're gonna do the cat cam, I'm gonna have to use... I don't know if this is a very good view. Nope. Oh, there we go. I don't know. Look at this. Anyway, so that's the situation. Now you will have to see my straw. All right, maybe we'll take the cat cam off for a little bit and go back to the regular camera. But there you go. That's the cat. She's sitting on my lap. So yes, we do have a donut today. I'm doing great over here. I told you, this live stream is going to be what it is on the tin. It's very chaotic. I'm not the absolute mess that I was at 11:30 in the morning when the only way to describe what was going on in my head was I was like a car stuck in a mud pit. I tried to make a to-do list and I couldn't even finish the to-do list because I was so weirdly anxious because I had too much cold brew. So I'm doing a lot better because it's many hours later. However, I do still have more caffeine in my system than I probably should. We do also have this donut, which is a root beer float donut. I guess kind of like appropriate for the temperature. It is 1 day old because I got it at the end of yesterday, but I think a 1 day old donut. It's still going to be good, but maybe I'll give it 0.5 more based on judging it as though I had gotten it fresh. Oh, are we going somewhere, Miss Princess? Dora is on the move. Okay. Aaron is out of town, so getting to see the kitty, I think, is very exciting. 32 is still terrible. I agree. 32 is still terrible. It's 32.2 or whatever is what the internet said. Okay, Miss Princess is gone. She did a great job. She managed to cover my black top completely in cat hair. That is what she aims to do, obviously, what she lives to do. I figured we could kind of talk about the debt ceiling because I have avoided talking about the debt ceiling again because I've talked about it at this point so many times. And I do think it is boring for non-American folks, but I keep trying to emphasize that like this is so catastrophic if they don't raise the debt ceiling before we run out of money. Like if the US defaults, because we've already hit the debt ceiling, and at this point the debt ceiling, which is the limit on how much the US federal government can borrow to meet its obligations. And this debt ceiling is like kind of a weird concept that's pretty unique to America. And then additionally, because a default where the U.S. doesn't pay back its bills would be so catastrophic to both like people in the United States and to international financial markets, to other countries' reserves, because the U.S. currency is the world reserve currency. A bunch of other countries hold U.S. debt. So like, because it would be so catastrophic if we don't raise the debt ceiling, it's not like theoretically, it's not a matter of debate about whether or not it will happen. But then what ends up happening is that as of 2011, the U.S. government, the Republicans, mainly like at the time, what was called the Tea Party, which was kind of like this faction inside of the Republicans that was kind of like a more, I wouldn't even say more right-wing, but just like a more maverick kind of subgroup within the Republicans, far less establishment. They figured out that they could hold the debt ceiling hostage to get other things that they wanted. And prior to that, they were pretty low-key affairs raising the debt ceiling because everybody agrees. Like, this is a thing where, like, there's not an economist out there that believes... Not a reputable economist out there, I should say that. Not a reputable economist out there that doesn't recognize that it would be, like, cataclysmic to not raise the U.S. debt ceiling. And so, like, it was usually a low-key affair. Then, once they recognized that they had some negotiating power because this had to get done, now it started to become this thing where we have a bunch of toughs going on every time we need to raise the debt ceiling. And it sounds like a good line because, you know, it's like, oh, the U.S. government can't pay your bills. If you had gone out and spent too much money on your credit card, the credit card company wouldn't raise your limit, which isn't necessarily true. If you continue to pay back your bills on time every time, credit card companies quite often do want to continue to lend you money because they are making money off of you. And guess what? That's roughly what is going on with the United States. We have always been very good at paying back our debt. And because of that, U.S. Treasury bonds are considered an extremely safe investment, to the point where short-term U.S. debt is actually used as the risk-free rate. Like in financial models, if you want to compare like the risk premium on investing in something against the risk-free rate, how much you would make on something that you are almost guaranteed to get back your investment on, you would compare against the Treasury bill, the 90-day Treasury bill. That is the risk-free rate. And that's because the U.S. has been very good at paying back our debt on time, every time. which is exactly what you should do for your credit score. And guess what? If you do that, credit card companies continue to lend you money. If you're have a very high income, credit companies will continue to lend you money. So while it is not in any way the same as an individual running up a debt, it is the same in terms of, yes, if you are good at paying back what you borrow on time, then people want to lend to you. However, if you keep having fights in your Congress over what is considered a fundamental part of the U.S. economy for over 100 years, which is that we borrow money. Since World War I, we've essentially been borrowing money to finance things because we, So it is, all this is to say, now we are at like the end of this, like, things are about to get very bad if they don't come up with a deal. And if you're in the camp that's just like, come on, they've always managed to do it. They've pulled it out at the 11th hour every time, because any reasonable person with the basic level of economics education that a congressperson should have understands that the U.S. can't default on our debt. This is a very big deal. It means that any individuals that that rely on federal government payments, so Social Security, disability payments, some people with certain military pensions, certain federal pensions, like those folks are not going to be getting checks next month if we run out of money to move things around, because we've already hit the debt ceiling. We're now into the extraordinary measures phase where Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is like borrowing money from other funds. It's literally called extraordinary measures in order to like meet our obligations. And the latest prediction is that by around August we'll run out of money, but Yellen is saying like it's probably June now. The reason we don't have a precise estimate is kind of like, think of America like a gig worker. You don't know exactly how much money is coming in. The predictions for how much they were going to take in tax revenue were actually, like, we were below expectations in terms of tax revenue. That is likely, most estimates that are likely, because the past couple of years, prior to 2022, there was a lot more capital gains. Housing prices were going through the roof, so a lot of people were making money even past the capital gains exclusion on selling property. And a lot of people had just incredibly highly valued stocks and were cashing out. So there was a lot of capital gains tax revenue. That is less true right now because the stock market isn't doing very well. People are hanging onto their houses. They're not flipping properties as much anymore because of interest rates going up. And so essentially the government collected fewer taxes than they thought. So like we're going to run out of money to like move around way faster than our best prediction, which was August. And it does look like the Democrats who were trying to say, like, you just have to raise the debt ceiling because that's what we're doing, and then, like, later we'll talk about a budget. They have now, as of, like, today, are reported to finally be admitting that they need to just have a negotiation with the Republicans. The Republicans are trying to get all sorts of things out of this. I mean, it's running the gamut, not at all related to the debt ceiling. They make arguments that they're related to the debt ceiling. One of the big sticking points that's really happening is, Republicans, certain Republicans really wanting to implement more work requirements for recipients of welfare benefits of certain types. So SNAP, which is food stamps. Previously, we had like a pause on requiring able-bodied childless adults, government's words, not mine, to like prove that they were looking for work in order to get food assistance. And in some states now they're also requiring that for Medicaid, which is low income health insurance in the states that do have it, that are also Republican controlled. That's usually kind of how it breaks down. And there's a possibility of them, like the Republicans, trying to attach even more of these, including to things like like WIC programs, which is Women, Infants, Children. It covers formula and emergency temporary assistance for needy families, which is kind of the only straight cash benefits that the government gives to low-income families. And so all of this to say, it looks like it's going to end up being a negotiation rather than just a straight debt ceiling raise. But, like, shit's going to get real bad. Excuse my cursing, but shit's going to get real bad very soon. And it's pretty terrifying. Like, it's very scary. And that isn't just the cold brew in me talking. Anyway, I've been chatting for too long, so let's chat with folks. Besotten with Cotton says, hola. Rural says, I mean, a U.S. default won't be boring for folks in other parts of the world for long. I do feel like kind of this is like people need to understand that, like, you know how Britain is going through like an absolute financial crisis right now. They had like the mini budgets that failed. This is a lot of it is very much a result of Brexit. Some of it is a result of the Ukrainian war. Like what Britain is going through right now with a cost of living crisis, with like hugely problematic fiscal issues going on in the British government. Now imagine that, but if Britain was the largest economy in the world and if the pound was the reserve currency. So you kind of get an idea of like, sure, Britain is this tiny little island with like not that much population, but it is real shit what's going down there. And it is having effects on especially like big trading partners with the UK and everything. But it is like, now imagine the United States, which is a hegemony in every sense of the word. Oh my God. I've told you, I'm a mess today. In every sense of the word, US is a hegemony. And like the absolute nonsense that's going on with not raising the debt ceiling has outsized effects on Americans, but also like most of the rest of the world. Very few countries are not trading partners with the US, and the ones that aren't trading partners with the US are the ones with sanctions against them mostly. And, you know, a lot of other countries use US dollars as their currency. Like, there are other countries that just straight up use US dollars. There's also a lot of countries that have weak local currencies, like for their own country, and then use US dollars sort of as like kind of their secondary currency. We're not the only currency that is true that for. Like a lot of countries use either euros or sometimes Great British pounds as their currency instead of their local one. Some countries use like rubles, but that has happened a lot like less. And then a couple other countries use yuan, Chinese currency. So anyway, once again, getting off track. But like, and then a ton more countries also peg or do a loose peg to the US dollar. Plus a ton of countries hold US Treasury bonds. And so like straight up, like we owe everybody money. The United States owes everybody money because they're all holding on to our debt. And that wasn't a problem when we were paying it back, because it's frankly great for our economy if people are holding on to our debt, because it means they value our debt. It means that we get to spend on U.S. domestic priorities, and then they get a little bit of interest. Rural made an excellent point, which is not good things happen to countries that don't pay their militaries. Yes, especially when their military is the most technologically advanced and one of the largest standing armies in the world, and also one of the I think we are the largest standing army in the world. It depends on how you measure. If you measure in terms of budget, we are, but if you measure in terms of people, we are not. I think that's correct. Anybody feel free to correct me. And then additionally, like, we have a lot of interventionist policies. So we have like quite a lot of people that are in our military that are involved in foreign conflicts. Whether or not we call them actually deployed is a different story because of lots of technical issues. But like, yeah, it's like tonight on the news, debt ceiling showdown 2023. This again. I know, correct. Christy Overton says, wow, that is worse than I thought. Yes, I absolutely, it's really bad. Like, it's hard to describe how bad this is going to be because, quite frankly, when this happened in 2011, it was like hard for people to understand, but at the same time, like all of the financial and economist folks were like freaking out. Like, I can't believe this is going on. Like, I can't believe we're discussing just like not raising the debt ceiling. And now we've gotten kind of weirdly normalized to it, but it is bananas that we have blown past it. And now we're like borrowing money from other funds right now. Like, we're literally raiding our piggy banks and then like using that money to pay other bills right now. Meanwhile, like the people in charge of running the country have just like decided that Bob White says, let's hit the thumbs up, folks. Oh, thank you. Thank you for doing the promo that I forget to do. Anyway, hi, welcome. Do you have any questions about the debt ceiling? Would you like to hear me rant more? Please put them in. I might be able to answer them. I might not. I might just give you random, unrelated facts. Yeah, it's bad. I mean, it's like, it's just so bad. Like, if your company, like, okay, if you work for the federal government, you gotta be real concerned. But if you work for a state or a local government that relies on federal funding, which is true for a lot of state and local governments, you should be worried about your job. If you work for, like, if you work for anybody that contracts with the government or relies on federal funding in some way, you should be worried about your job. If you work for a large publicly traded corporation that holds a significant number of U.S. Treasury bills because that's where they store money for short-term cash, you should be worried. Like, you don't even need to work for a U.S. corporation. Like, a lot of corporations, as part of large multinational corporations, as part of their overall financial portfolio, hold U.S. Treasury debt. Like, this is concerning. A lot of companies in the world are publicly traded in the United States. The really big companies in the entire global economy are mainly traded on U.S. exchanges, even if they're not U.S. currencies. And like, there is if this really happens, like, there will be hits beyond what we have already seen as far as market corrections down. Yeah. Besotten with Cotton says, maybe a not good time to get hired at the VA. I mean, I don't want to say that you should be avoiding government jobs because of the shutdown, the, possibility of a shutdown, any more than I want to say that any sector is at risk. But yes, I would say that's more at immediate risk. I would like to dig into, I'm actually really curious, like, I'm assuming VA funding is pretty much exactly tied into it. Oh, cool. Yeah, actually the most recent negotiation is trying to cut VA funding by 22%, so that's great. Yeah, I mean, one of the things is that, like, some of the allocations can be moved around, and so, like, all these different, it's hard. You have to figure out exactly which part of the federal government, like, where the money comes from, but I shouldn't assume there will be a sweet, sweet pension. I mean, there will be a sweet, sweet pension at the VA if you get that job, but whether or not that job will immediately go on pause is one question. It's an impossible situation that they're trying to put on us, and I cannot believe we're talking about it again. And I've talked about this before, but, like, it's freaking unusual that we have this. There's a couple other countries that, like, kind of make their national government, like, vote on how much debt they have, but not to the extent the United States does. So, No, Your Joe says, I have to ask what is main topic. Just got online. Interesting question. Not really a main topic. We're kind of talking about the debt ceiling. I'm ranting about the debt ceiling is more accurate. This is a chaotic live stream as advertised in the title. I had too much cold brew today and I'm all over the place. And my anxiety is now manifesting in terms of talking about the US debt ceiling and how much of a disaster it'll be if they don't freaking get it together. So yeah, hello, welcome. That's all valuable information, thank you. I mean, it's depressing. Very depressing, it's all depressing. I'm struggling to, like, find a way to accurately describe exactly, like, what would be really bad about this without just referencing everything. But, like, every analysis that I've seen, if we truly run out of money and default on our debt, like, a U.S. federal debt default is, quite frankly, probably worse than the Lehman Brothers collapse in 2008. Like, genuinely might be worse. So, that's... Most of the government is bloated. Making sensible cuts might be a good thing, but this is not sensible cuts. This is not paying back the debt for the money we've already borrowed. This is not a budget discussion. This is literally, like, they've already spent this money. These debates have already happened. This is obligations that the US government has and essentially defaulting, declaring bankruptcy. It is an entirely different discussion about, hey, let's unbloat the US government. Like, I think that's what's frustrating about the, like, narratives. These are two separate discussions. The how do we allocate and budget for what is coming in the future, and how do we make hard choices about, like, you know, maybe scaling back certain parts of the government. That is a very, very different question than, does the US government not pay the debt for things they've already spent in the past? Like, we already had a democratic process to spend the money that we now need to pay on. And by not raising the debt ceiling, we are quite simply saying, fuck it, we don't care. It's very different. Fuzzbubble says, probably a stupid question, but is this related to the government shutdowns for lack of funding that have happened several times in the past few years? Related, but not the same. So the government shutdowns, like the shutdowns and the sequester, were not the same as defaulting on our debt. They all kind of had various different things, but, like, yeah, if you remember them, like, eating pizza and getting pizza delivered while they were trying to run the debt ceiling in the, like, last government shutdown, yes, it was a similar kind of discussion. But it's not the same as defaulting on the debt. We have not yet defaulted. We have saved our butt at the 11th hour in the past. So, like, the previous government shutdowns, I'm trying to find the right way to describe this. Previous government shutdowns is because money, like, they failed to pass a budget, and so then money wasn't allocated to those things. So it's exactly what I was saying, where it's like this isn't about making cuts. It's about, like, making payments on the debt, which is the budgets we've already passed in the past. The government shutdowns happened because the appropriations and the budgets were, like, not passed for various agencies. And so the government had shutdowns. A failure to raise the debt ceiling means that we will default on our debt and we will not pay back our debt. And that is, like, financially, like, far, far more concerning. So, yeah, that is the two situations. And we've been acting under extraordinary measures for 5 months now, which is, like, wild. So, yeah. Let me know if that made sense. Like I said, I'm sorry. I am really still very cold brewed up, and I'm not sure I can accurately describe, like, words. I have trouble even comprehending accepting how disastrous defending federal programs are to people who depend on them, and it's exponentially more horrifying to think of the actual consequences of this. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's really real considerations that people need to make about, like, in their life, you probably have someone that you know that relies on what we call entitlement programs, so Social Security income, Social Security disability income, like, you probably have someone in your life that relies on it. A great example is foster kids. Like, I work with foster kids, and all of those kids, like, that all is money that usually flows from the federal government. A lot of those kids are receiving Social Security survivor benefits. Like, the money to support those kids is going to disappear. So you might have your parents or grandparents that rely on Social Security income. Maybe you yourself do. Maybe your spouse is on disability, like, income. Like, any of those things, you need to think about what you would do if that stopped showing up next month, because that is a possibility if they don't raise the debt ceiling. Yeah, Christy said, did you say 5 months? Yeah, we've been doing these extraordinary we hit the debt ceiling in January. And, like, Yellen has been, like, moving money around in accounts. And originally, Yellen said, the Treasury Secretary Yellen, she said that, like, in August we would run out. Now she's been saying June 1st. So, Basan with Cotton says, my job doesn't exist without Medicaid and SSDI working properly. Yeah, I mean, like, the trickle-on effects. Like, even if you are not receiving Social Security disability income, like, if you if you are underneath that and, like, you work with people that receive that kind of income, if you rent to people that rely on that income and you are a landlord, like, the amount of seismic effects that happen when the largest economy in the world and the world reserve currency and what is considered to be the most stable form of debt, like, that you can acquire is, it is bad. Words are hard. You're great and I learned a lot. Thanks. Well, thank you. I have improved quite a bit. I'm really glad I didn't live stream at like 11:30 this morning, because I just was sitting at this desk, like, staring into space, trying to get my brain to stop being like a monster truck stuck in a mud pit. I could not, like, get the full, like, I just, like, kept revving up and not going anywhere. That's, like, the description of what my brain was doing. And that is because I had too much cold brew. It appears to me the only thing they're interested in is spending more. Debts need to be paid. Well, but, like, that's the thing, is, like, that's not, spending more is not what's under debate. That's not what we're worried about. Like, that is like a different question. You know, running a deficit is why we owe this debt, right? We're running a deficit. We've spent more, which is not necessarily bad. We, like other countries, find our debt desirable. We are very good at paying it back in the past. You know, we do financing just the same way that you probably did not buy your house in cash. Like, you probably had a mortgage, which was at a low interest rate, and it was to the bank's benefit to lend that money to you, and you were able to buy something and then finance it, like, over a longer period of time, making it make more sense. Like, that's what the U.S. government does, right? If they run a deficit, which isn't always true. Under Clinton, we had a balanced budget, so we didn't have to run a deficit, didn't have to raise the debt ceiling. And the economy was quite good when Bill Clinton was in office, because it was late 90s. It's not necessarily due to Bill Clinton, due to lots of things, you know, market factors, business cycle. But, like, if we run a deficit, we done already spent that money. And this is not about having a conversation about spending more. This is a conversation about raising this arbitrary limit that we set, that also, like, no other country requires a vote of their congressional, like, or whatever their Congress equivalent of, whatever their, you know, governing body is. no other country requires a vote in order to issue debt the way that we do. And we used to not require it. We started doing that in World War II because we started running more of a, or in World War One because we were running more of a deficit because wars be expensive. Also, one of the reasons we spend so much money is because we love fighting in other people's wars or making up new wars to fight in the United States. Like, our massive standing volunteer military is one of the reasons our federal spending is so high. It is one of the largest expenditures of the U.S. government, and outstripping a lot of other spending areas. You know, we spend all this time fighting about entitlement programs or fighting over food stamps when they are a minuscule in comparison to how much we spend on defense spending. And like, that money is already spent. Also, one of the only things that's considered bipartisan in US politics is the military, right? Like, everybody loves vets. Military is considered fairly bipartisan. There are, a few objectors here and there or to various wars. But like, yet we're having this little pissing match over the debt ceiling. Like, it's a big, big, scary deal. So, Bazad with Cotton says, totally off topic, but your whole look today is amazing. I'm actually wearing a skating dress under this because it is so hot that I like needed my legs exposed, but you all are not going to get to see them. But thank you. I appreciate that. It's a very I felt like it was going with the chaos vibes. Rural says, husband's position is funded entirely by a federal grant. I mean, and probably the good news is that like a grant, probably the money has already been allocated. So, the sunset would be longer as far as Pixie Dust says, switching from Drag Race to Debt Crisis, an abrupt tone shift. You know what? Let's talk about Drag Race. That sounds great. I actually am not watching this season, though, so I don't know if I will have any commentary. I don't believe the U.S. should be the police force of the world unless someone can present information that changes my mind. Yeah, I mean, I'm not here to debate military spending because I, personally just don't want to. That's why I'm a journalist and not a politician. But I will say, it is undeniable the, catastrophic effects of not raising the debt ceiling. And it isn't about having a conversation about future spending. It is about having, raise the debt ceiling, then have the discussions about the future budget. But, it's not a back and forth. So the difference between not budgeting for current future expenses that we've already committed to but haven't spent yet and not paying back money we already borrowed and spent. Correct. Yes. It's, I agree. Your look is great today. Thanks, guys. My, kind of quirky witch look, whatever it is. Modern witch. The cat has abandoned me. Should we eat a donut? I really went off on a rant there. So I feel like it might be donut time. Root beer float to go with the unreasonably hot weather. And then we will come back and either, I don't know, talk about Drag Race so that we can end on an uplifting note. Or we could talk about the debt ceiling some more. Oh, Pixie Dust asked a good question. Let's do the donut first, and then I will answer that question about the debt ceiling. All right. So, there we go. This is the donut. It is like a root beer float donut. So I guess it'll taste like root beer on the inside. It's got the straw. The straw is not edible. And then the cream. You can see just how tall it is. A little bit of the cream got on top of the box. So I did say that I was going to give this a 0.5 upgrade because it is a day old, and I don't think it's fair to judge them by a day old donut. I'm not really getting the root beer flavor. Okay. I'm tasting, like, no root beer flavor. It just tastes like a donut, and then that was cream. Pixie Dust says, is it almost over? I thought I was only like 5 minutes late. We started at 5 Pacific. So you're like 40 minutes late, but also my stream is very chaotic. Honestly, I don't get the root beer at all. It's supposed to be root beer float, and they like make their own root beer. But it's... Okay. Remind me what the taste of root beer is. It's the sassafras, right? Or the sarsaparilla? The sarsaparilla? What makes root beer taste like root beer? The cream is good. It's very messy. Rural says maybe the donut shop people have never had root beer. They actually make their own root beer there. That's why I'm so confused. I'm still not tasting the root beer really at all. What if I have COVID? And I've just like... I'm like losing my sense of taste, but it's starting with the root beer taste. Rural says either sassafras or sarsaparilla depending on the time period of the root beer. Wait. I just thought I had those words confused. What is the difference between sassafras and sarsaparilla? Sassafras is a plant. Oh, I didn't realize this, but sassafras is a nickname for MDA, the drug MDA, the recreational drug MDA. I had no idea. I'm going to get demonetized on this stream for all of my cursing about the debt ceiling combined with saying a slang name for a drug. Maybe they don't know how to make good root beer. I've had the root beer before. I thought it was fine. I'm just not tasting it in the donut. Y'all, if I got COVID, maybe the caffeine turned off my taste buds. Texture-wise, it's exceptional. The cream is, like, great. But it's, like... It just doesn't have that kick of it. It's... I don't know. I'm not gonna rank it that high, y'all. I said I was going to give it an extra 0.5 because it was day old. So, like, I can tell the texture probably would have been a little better if I had had it yesterday. I think it's a 3.5. I would have given it a 3, and I upgraded it to the 0.5 because I'm eating it day old. But, like, I don't think I'd order it again. Yeah, I don't think I would order it again. The cream is great, but they put the cream on other ones of the donuts, and... I don't know. Kind of boring. I thought that one was going to be, like, a lot more interesting. Yeah, for a day old, I think it's 3.5. I do love a quality root beer. Too bad it didn't translate into a donut. Yeah, they do root beer floats there because they make ice cream, like vegan ice cream as well. Okay, Rural, come in with the root beer facts. Earlier, it was sassafras. It grows here. It tastes like root beer. Can be toxic in large doses. I feel like I remember that from, like, when I was a kid. And from, like, reading the Little Women's Handy book. which is a 1900s Victorian, like, handy book guide. Very good. And then sarsaparilla or tropical plants. Interesting. Okay. Thank you for all of your... Fuzzbubble says, maybe the root beer flavoring breaks down quickly and it's gone after a day. Maybe. I think it's just, I didn't think it didn't translate into a donut very well. Pixie Dust says, my sense of time is also extremely chaotic. Okay, but Pixie Dust had a debt ceiling question, not to pivot back from fun sarsaparilla, sassafras facts. Why do we even have a debt ceiling if it always gets raised? So we've raised it, I think, 74 times since 1911 when we originally established it. So it used to be that Congress had to vote every single time we wanted to issue any kind of debt. And then in World War I, which was like kind of inefficient, right? So like anytime we wanted to issue any bonds, they had to vote. But then we were going to vote in World War I. So, or not vote. We're going to fight in World War I. I'm doing great, y'all. We're going to fight in World War I. And so what they ended up doing was saying, hey, it's inefficient for every time that we want to issue war bonds to like have to meet and vote and like individually authorize every single one of these bonds. So what they did instead was say, we'll put a limit and then you come back to us if you want to do more, right? So like if we don't have enough tax revenue that comes in to pay for the spending that we have already voted on, then the Treasury is like empowered to issue bonds, but only up to a certain amount. And then we'll come back and we'll vote to raise it. And it was like, frankly, pretty automatic for most of the time that they were doing it. You know, we didn't always have to raise it. It wasn't like it was an every year sort of thing. It was like an every couple years sort of thing. You know, when tax revenue was really high and or spending was low, then we would end up having a, you know, we wouldn't run a deficit and then we wouldn't be issuing bonds necessarily. You know, there was a lot of spending at certain time periods. So wars are always very expensive. I don't know if you heard, but the U.S. seemed to be a big fan of those in the 20th century. And the early 21st century, we got more and more into them. Wars are very expensive. And then the other thing that you'll end up issuing a lot of debt for when you authorize spending on it are things like large expansion programs and support programs. So one of those would be Social Security, and FDR's New Deal was, you know, a package in which where we would be out there spending some money. And Social Security has its own trust, and, you know, eventually that trust is going to run out of money, but it like the establishment of it costs money. You know, all of the kind of post-war GI bills and stuff that we did to give baby boomers an opportunity after they came back from fighting to, you know, like establish themselves and go to college and be able to buy houses with things like VA mortgages. Like all of that kind of federal programs often involved some kind of spending that at some point issuing bonds was paying for. So we have this debt ceiling. It's very rare. Like not many other countries have this kind of thing, and no one has it to the level where it's like now been weirdly politicized about it. But like, yeah, it's just been, yeah. The only other time that we have like outright defaulted in the United States, which was in 1979 when they failed to redeem 122 million of treasury bills. So they will just keep usually just voting to do this. And also I want to say that 122 million of treasury bills in 1979 is like so tiny compared to the amount that is going on. I'm generous with the points. Thanks. Maybe the name because of how it looked rather than how it tasted. I mean, it was fine, but... Betty Plush says, this stream kept me company while I put up new curtains. Congrats for putting up curtains. Putting up curtains is hard. Unless you do it the way I used to do it, which was that I would just put them up with tacks. Ben Dog says, vote about going into debt to enter World War I. You know, vote. Thank you. I appreciate what is going on. It appears wars support the MIC. What is the MIC? What is MIC abbreviating? But I mean, wars in general are like Keynes always said, wars are good for an economy, right? Wars generally, if they have popular support politically, they're great for an economy. You have to produce, suddenly you have a lot more people that are employed by the government and that are getting paid by the government. You have to pay for veterans benefits and widows benefits for killed soldiers. You have to buy new tanks and make bullets and missiles and all sorts of government contracting. Military industrial complex. Wars do support the military industrial complex. I mean, that's very much true. So yeah, absolutely. But I mean, they're one and the same, are they not? They also prop up the economy, right? That like wars are an excellent way to get an economy roaring hot. If you've got especially a very big war, as you can ask some former U.S. presidents. So please break it down for me what happens if the U.S. faults on the debt. I think I've explained this already, but anybody that receives what's called entitlement benefits are not going to be getting checks as soon as we default. So you won't be getting Social Security disability, SNAP benefits, women and children's benefits. The people that work for federal government wouldn't have a job unless there's some like pot of money that's already been issued, like that their jobs would be at risk. People that work for publicly traded corporations that hold U.S. Treasury debt are going to be at risk for their jobs. Stocks and financial markets are going to be in full chaos. It is going to be a bigger financial disaster than what happened with Lehman Brothers in 2008. Every analysis I've seen has said that, and I, based on my training, would venture to say that. We'd have, people that work for the military would not be getting paid. There's really serious consequences. I mean, if we default, our credit rating would downgrade as the U.S., so people's pensions and retirement funds that are invested in U.S. Treasury bonds, so particularly people that are closer to retirement age, so they might have or are already retired and therefore have more of their portfolio in bonds and U.S. Treasury bonds, which are generally considered very low risk, would suddenly have much more volatile portfolios than they're expecting to. So would the politicians still get paid? That's an interesting question. I don't know if I'm enough of an expert to say that. I imagine that they would not. I mean, the congressional staff, but I'd have to truly investigate to be able to answer that really confidently, because I don't want to say absolutely they wouldn't get paid, because I'm sure they'd find a way. But generally, I would say that at some point the funding would run out for their jobs. The worst, Joe, would be if our bond rating was lowered again. Yeah, so in 2011, when we had all this hemming and hawing, the U.S. Debt got downgraded from AAA. But, we're back up, but then we're down again now with this still, rampant one. They'd still get paid from lobbyists. You say that, but, I'm not positive that lobbyists would be spending on politicians that have completely destroyed. Right? The point of lobbying is to get government contracts or to get favorable policies passed for your corporation or your industry. And like, I cannot imagine a lobbyist being like, hey, person who just destroyed the global economy and like brought on a financial crisis by like pitching a fit and not doing like a basic thing. I'm not really sure if they would do that. Mechanical industrial complex. I have not heard that term before, but you're saying typically big businesses. I'll use the term Fortune 500 companies to refer to big businesses, which I think is roughly probably the same as mechanical industrial complex, but I don't know the definition of that term. I haven't heard it before. Yeah, I mean, everybody would be in a world of hurt. Bonds are very important to individual, regular people's pensions. U.S. Treasury bonds are what the grandma on your block is probably invested in. They are like what your union, your local carpenters union has their pensions in. This is one of the reasons that the financial crisis in 2008 and like all of this like crap that was going on with these like highly risky collateralized mortgage debt, like where they were packaging they were making these risky mortgage loans, and then they were packaging them up as very highly rated, very reliable securities, and they were being bought by pensions. Like, this is why when the bottom fell out of the housing market and all of these securities-backed mortgages started to die, this is exactly what happened here, right? Like, we saw the consequences be felt by people that weren't big enough to get some sort of bailout. And that is exactly what will happen in the case of that. Bonds probably prop up life insurance, mutual benefit association annuities as well. Bonds, life insurance does have investment in U.S. Treasuries. Like, there's no... bonds is just a term for a securitized debt. So, like, yes, everybody has bonds. Like, anybody that is invested has a mix of bonds and stocks, usually, in the portfolio. That includes probably you in your 401k or your 403b. Like, usually you do not want to have a portfolio that is entirely based on what are called equities, which is owning pieces of companies. Nor do you want to have all of your assets tied up in your house, because if your house gets wiped out by a flood, that would be bad, right? So if you've got a diversified portfolio, you will hold bonds, which are other people's debts that they pay back on, and they are a securitized debt, meaning they are a security, right? None of those are considered risk-free. However, in financial models, for what we define as the risk-free rate, we use the 90-day Treasury bill. And that is because the U.S. government always pays its debt back until possibly now. So, yeah. Okay, military-industrial complex, I have heard. Darn autocorrect. I was like, mechanical-industrial complex is not a term I'm familiar with. It doesn't mean it's not a real term. But, yeah, okay. I am familiar with military-industrial complex. Yeah. I don't know. It's a lot. I'm sorry to, like, just spew at you all. It's very concerning. Like, the level of... should you have fear, and what can you do as an individual, I guess is a good place to end on. Should you have fear? Probably a little bit of fear. I don't know if you should be making a doomsday bunker, but it is worth thinking about what you, as an individual, would do for the people in your life that might lose their jobs or their sources of income if Social Security payments stopped, if their federal job suddenly stopped. Like, think about it from the perspective of, like, what in your immediate circles you would do in that case. I do also think it's worth thinking about the possibility of having some money in a non-US currency. So this is absolutely not a recommendation as far as any particular currency. But, you know, if you have a huge chunk of your assets in US currency and you want to hedge a little bit about around what's going on, one way that you can diversify is have some money in foreign currencies. Ideally, a currency that is not heavily correlated with the US dollar. So, you know, like the Mexican peso is like pretty much analogous to the US dollar. Like it moves up and down relative to the US generally. So it wouldn't be a good option. But that is maybe more preparation than a lot of people need to do. It's unlikely to be like apocalyptic nightmare on day one. It's going to be kind of like if you were like an adult during the last financial crisis and recession, the big one, during the Great Recession. And you remember how there was just like this kind of like everything just was sort of kind of like slowly getting worse in weird ways, and how a lot of our current financial system as well as our political system in the US kind of has felt that way in some ways for a while. I think it's more likely that that's going to kind of happen. The only way I would say that it'll feel more immediate is if you either work in one of those roles where you're directly tied to the federal government's debts and like federal government funding, or if you live in a city that is highly concentrated around that. So like if you live in DC, if you live in a city where like almost everybody works for the military base, then that is a situation where you might see like much more immediate effects. But I gotta say, hope springs fucking eternal. They are gonna fix this shit out. They're gonna like figure their stuff out, and they're gonna make sure that everything is tight and good. How do you diversify in a foreign currency? I'm answering this in a purely hypothetical way. This is not financial advice. That's all I'm going to say. Technically, I'm licensed to give advice on finances, but this is not financial advice. So diversifying in a foreign currency would just be holding some assets in a foreign currency. But here's the thing. If you are not someone that is regularly going to be possibly using that foreign currency, you really shouldn't hold tons of money in a foreign currency necessarily, because like currency only has utility when you can exchange it for goods and services, right? So just holding on to it as a hedge against US dollars is not something like an average person tends to do. But if you are in the position where you may find that holding on to foreign currencies is useful to you. So like, for example, I buy a fair amount of like clothing from abroad, and I hold money in other currencies. When the Great British Pound was pretty much on sale because their government had gone awry, I transferred some US dollars onto my like online bank account that lets me hold multiple currencies. What I did was I bought some Great British Pounds while they were on sale. So I spent fewer of my US dollars, which is what I earned most of my money in, and to buy Great British Pounds, so that had more purchasing power because the prices are sticky in Great British Pounds. I've also done that for euros when the euro was having also kind of the same thing, like a little bit of a fiscal crisis, and their currency was a little teeter-tottery. What I will say is that financial markets bake a lot of these costs in. So it's hard to be smarter than people that spend all day looking at foreign exchange rates and pricing things into the currency markets. So it isn't necessarily something you should do unless it is something you have already done, if that makes sense. Like, are you going to go out and learn enough about foreign exchange currencies if you are not someone that regularly engages with this in order to predict and save yourself against foreign currencies? Probably not. I hold money in euros and Great British Pounds and US dollars, and those are the three currencies that I hold money in. So, and that's because I have concrete reasons to hold all of those currencies, but I tend to do a little bit of arbitrage around when I purchase them. On a lighter note, it's also wrecking econ textbooks in the future. Oh, I hate this. I hate this. I'm tired of living in an unprecedented times, y'all. I'm tired of living in unprecedented times. If I could afford it, I would have a doomsday bunker or two. We have food storage at least, but that has more to do with like the inevitable earthquake than it does have to do with financial collapse. Just because we live like on an subduction zone. So like at some point we're gonna have a giant earthquake. So we do have like food storage. Oh yeah, Canadian dollar is like hella highly correlated with US dollar. Yeah, so $1 Canadian has been around 75 US cents, or 0.75 US cents for almost decades, other than that pesky 08 to 09 period. Exactly. Although there was recently another period where it was starting to do a little differently. But yeah, that's a highly correlated currency. Is storing money in Canadian dollars a hedge against a US debt? Not really necessarily. If you are someone that has a lot of reason to hold Canadian currency, and there is a good advantage to maybe having some Canadian currency if we're going to default on debt. So, okay, y'all, we've been streaming for an hour, and this is really a lot. How about you all tell me something you are looking forward to this week before we go, instead of just me continuing to rant about the debt ceiling. I also need to go and meal prep because I haven't done that yet today because I was, like I said, I've been an anxious mess all day. So, Betty Plush, some who are at high risk of disappearing income due to this issue, especially government agencies, may be required to report if they hold non-U.S. currency investments due to security clearance reporting. Thank you for tuning in on that. I had forgotten to mention that. But yes, you do have to make disclosures if you have security clearance. So a good note there from Betty for people that would apply to. So, yes, things. New farmers market in the county seat on Saturday. Ooh, that sounds fun. Are you gonna go, or are you just excited that there is going to be one? Ben Dog says, I'm looking forward to seeing my office in downtown Portland as my out-of-town boss is visiting, and enjoying a fancy meal at Higgins on the company. Oh, nice. Yeah, I am also. I've been going into an office now for like 2 months, and I forgot how much I enjoy actually being in an office and putting on clothes every day, like full outfits and not just outfits from here up where people are going to see me. My partner and I are planning a mini adventure this weekend to try a new restaurant somewhere in the area he's enjoying researching. Ooh, fun. Are you going to do more, or is it like just going to be the restaurant? To me, that's like a lot of excitement for a day. So Meteor X says, catching up on my planner entries this week. Are you doing like backloading planner? Are you one of those people that likes to like, even if you didn't use it on the day, like see what you put in it? I'm always curious. Dog sitting at my parents' golden retriever this weekend. Oh, I wish you much energy. I'd go to the new farmers market. Just shopping, not selling. That sounds very exciting, though. What is the progression of the new currency base that other countries are trying to establish? I'm not sure what you mean. Like, are you talking about e-currencies? Like the e-yuan that's happening, which is like a digital, not a crypto, but like a digital currency? Or like just having, or, are you saying a new reserve currency? Nobody's had any luck with that. Russia is trying to like do all its trade in rubles right now, and that has more to do with the US sanctions. But yeah, I don't think much of those are going anywhere right now. It's too, like, there's a lot to unwind there. Depends on where, but probably just the restaurant. Oh, he doesn't like long walks. He must be, maybe he's an older or just an unusual golden retriever. I thought they just like have a lot of energy. I don't know if it's like walks, but they like have a lot of energy. For the next week, I'm looking forward to your next stream, as well as Aaron's. Y'all are awesome. Oh, thank you very much. That's very sweet. I hopefully will be a little less chaotic next Tuesday, y'all. Meteor X says, I'm behind on my planner stuff. April is more like a reflection on what has happened rather than upcoming events. Yeah, sometimes I end up doing that on my, like, my monthlies. I'll end up, like, going back and filling in the month. If I, try to show this off. But yeah, I'll, like, end up going back in my monthly and kind of, like, filling in the things that happened, and it's less about the, like, planning than my dailies are. So, yeah, I am familiar with that method. Little Sakura cat. Okay. Yes, new reserve currency. China, Brazil, etc. Well, Brazil's got other things going on right now. Yeah, if you look at the names on that list, I think you're gonna see that there's a possibility that something happens, but that it isn't necessarily adopted by other countries. But frankly, if the U.S. defaults on its debt, anything's possible. So, I mean, China is going to be in a world of frickin' hurt if they default on U.S. Because they own so many U.S. Treasury bonds. They're the second largest holder after Japan of U.S. Treasury bonds. So, like, it's not going to be good for them. They also use it to keep their currency. They, use strategic U.S. Treasury bond reserves as a way of strategically keeping their currency to have a good ratio with the U.S., who is their largest trading partner, like their currency to make their exports cheaper, right? So, some politicians will call it manipulating currency, but like they have a target that they like to keep the yuan at vis-a-vis the U.S. Currency. And the like important thing for them is making sure that as an export economy, they can continue to be able to export, all of the various things, many of which here around me are made in China, are considered advantageously priced to the rest of the world. And because of that, the U.S. defaulting would be a big problem for them. I mean, because of many things, it would be a big problem for them. And if U.S. is in a depression, which is like impossible, we'll definitely be in a recession, but we could be in like a fucking depression, which is 6 quarters of negative economic growth. Like if we default on our debt, like that is very bad for China. So, and China's not doing great right now either. They also had a lot of bid up and overvalued stuff. And then people are just like not going out and like spending the things that they expected to spend. And they haven't really quite recovered from like their really aggressive lockdowns and stuff. So yeah, know your Joe says, are those hand-drawn images in your planner? Generally most of these things are stickers. So yeah, some of them are, but most of them are stickers. People more talented than me will draw on them. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you all enjoy your dog walks, your farmers markets, seeing your offices, your restaurants, whatever you are doing this week, filling out your planners, whatever you're looking forward to. And I will post next week's live stream like way earlier. I'm sorry I only posted it today. Like I said, it's been a weird day. But thank you all for coming and spending a little time with me. It was very nice to see you all. I hope I didn't make you feel too bad about impending doom, because I will say there's not a lot you can do about it. The only thing you could do is if you do have a congressperson who is not getting it together with regards to the debt ceiling, you could reach out to them and ask them, hey, could you vote on this? So are we in a recession? No, we're not in the recession. That is two consecutive quarters of negative GDP, and we haven't actually had that yet. But it certainly feels like we're in a recession. I've done a bunch of live streams on the recession, so if you want to tune in me talking about the definitions, you can do that. But if we default, recession be coming. Certainly feels like it is with how high inflation has been, but that's finally cooling down. Okay, I'm getting off track here. Y'all, thank you so much. Have a lovely, lovely rest of your night or morning if you're in the rest of the world. Stay safe, stay hydrated, pet a cat if you have one available.